Hi, everyone. Let me say that it's a privilege to be chairing this panel. Maybe if we can get on to some of the questions that have begun to arrive. And I must say that there's going to be a lot more questions that we can possibly field in the time we have. So maybe if we can launch right into it. Many of the questions seem to have the theme of what is it that we can do better, and particularly how in the current crisis within Afghanistan can we help people actually making it to Australia. And another stream addresses how can we help people, how can we change the government, and of course, Craig, you alluded to this in your speech. How can we change the government's mind, but I suppose also people's minds, so they pressure the government to enable people already here, to become Australian citizens, and also how can we resolve the very difficult issues that people are finding living in Afghanistan.
First of all, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to be among such important conversation today, and I also would like to pay my respect from the land that I am speaking to you guys, from the land of Derek, and I pay my respect to the elders past, present, and emerging. The platform that I am representing today, the organization that's by the name of Afghan Women on the Move, we are an advocacy platform, and we are very grassroots organization that works with women, and especially women from a place of trauma, torture and trauma. For myself, as an Afghan woman, I came here as a refugee from under the humanitarian program, Women at Risk. And I would like to acknowledge the importance work of the STARTs too. I was under their supervision for 5 years. I was so broken, I was so tired, I was so traumatized that I had to be under the program for exactly 5 years. And every fortnight, I was going to see a counselor and a psychologist and a psychiatrist. The reason I brought this one, which is not easy for me to always talk about the time that I came from Taliban, which is 22 years ago. But the reason I'm bringing my own story here to address the needs of Afghan here and back home is to, I'm not trying to compare my pain to the pain of people that are been through and are going through, but at the same time, when you're from a place of trauma, most of the time, you can resonate with the pain and the displacement of other people, no matter where they're from. So for us to work with Afghan community at this time of crisis, this Taliban regime, this brutal regime has taken us by surprise. To be honest, I never thought in my wildest dream, that I will be running away or escape from Taliban #1, trying to heal, trying to think that I'm getting better. The future, it looks good for me, for myself, for my children, for the women that have been working in Afghanistan from the organization that I'm working with. And we end up 22 years ago when we were just about, we were on the edge of things to push a little bit more and get things in a better and more more contemporary kind of have approach to it. And we just end up back to Taliban #2. And these Taliban, to be honest, haven't changed. All we can see is they're better talking on TVs and behind the microphones and have their latest mobile phones on their hands. That's all they have at the moment. So how do we now going to challenge the perceptions about the refugee women, the refugee communities that are coming here, and have Greg and other panelists or other speakers mentioned before, that how to change the narrative about refugees that are coming here in Australia. The refugees that are coming here from the past 20 years from Afghanistan, they will not be as broken and as isolated when I came 22 years ago. Because when I came 22 years ago, I came from a place that I was in a dark place. There was no social media, there was no exposure, there was nothing. So I came Absolutely. And every time I say that I first came to Australia, I want to scream and I want to cry because I came with nothing, no prior education, no work experience, no language. I had no idea where Australia was. But the people that are coming and there was a lot of effort put into me, and I had to do a lot more to prove myself that refugees, or to challenge that perception of women of color or women that are coming from a place of trauma with no language or no prior education and experience, to challenge that perception that we are as human as you guys, and we have the same aspiration, hope, and dreams. Well, it took me 20 years to be able to speak in another language and do my studies in higher education. And now I work in a mainstream organization. I'm now a founder. I write stories, monologues, I perform. All of this took me 22 years. But the people that are coming now from Afghanistan, they are in a much better place. They will be an Australian government will not be as tied, their hands will not be tied to work with them because they have education. They've been exposed to the outside world. These young boys and girls that will be coming, all we need to do is to give them a safe place, a safe environment. They will quickly blossom and will become part of our society. So that's my call for our leaders, for international organizations, to put pressure and to advocate and to change the narratives of the people that are coming now from speaking about now in Afghanistan, that these people are coming from a much better place that they have learned. And unfortunately that we now back in Taliban regime. No, I'm not saying that they didn't have much challenges in the past 20 years. Still, especially women, still were discriminated from different aspects, but they were given opportunity to be themselves to some extent. But look at Taliban now. This morning, they were just announced that women are not allowed to wear colorful clothes. They cannot wear high heels and they cannot wear perfume. My heart at the moment, I can hear my heartbeats talking. I'm not just speaking from that emotional aspects and the traumatic aspects to it, but it is really painful because I have worked with Afghan women back in Afghanistan in the past 20 years old. I've been from place of, I've seen Taliban, what it happens, and I'm in contact with the women in Afghanistan right now. And I acknowledge the work that our minister and Department of Home Affairs and few other leaders in the community are doing. And we are very much in contact with them, especially those that they have now visas and they are stuck. So every night I'm sure Greg and all of you guys can relate to me. I'm doing the interpreting on the ground there. I communicate with the ministers to just give them that information. And there's a lot needs to be done. But all I'm saying, and I hope I'm not being too confusing here for you guys, is that change the narratives of refugees. And especially now that we are receiving refugees from Afghanistan, and Australia is a rich country. Australia is a beautiful country. We can accommodate more than these 3,000 people that already kind of will be giving visas, that they are coming with a lot to give to Western worlds. If when some people say, what are we going to do with refugees? Refugees also change as much as the rest of the world has changed. They improved as well, especially those that were given some opportunities to help themselves and build themselves. So that's all from me at the moment, guys. Thanks.
Thank you, Maryam. And I suppose that, and thank you for those comments, and I'd like to welcome Sneha and Lwin. You were not the only ones to have difficulty joining the panel. I had some difficulties too, but we're all together now and we're addressing this very important question. And suppose what you just said gears towards what's behind a lot of the questions coming in, which are, how do we change that narrative? What is the most effective way to change the narrative among people in Australia in general, but also in terms of the government of the day, both in terms of the policies affecting people already in Australia, but also policies directed to making it easier for people to come from places like Afghanistan who are in crisis now, but many other places where refugees are in need. We know that now the program has not been active for almost 2 years. So we have a program in paper, but not many people, apart from the Afghan evacuees, that have been able to make it in the country, into the country. Who would like to go first? And can I ask you, let's try to keep the interventions, the answers short, because all of you have a lot to contribute. Jamil?
All right. Thanks for everyone for organizing this meeting today. First of all, I really want to thank Courage and all those other people who mentioned really good points for Afghanistan earlier today. And on top of what Maryam said today is what Taliban came to Australia first from 1996 to 2001, and they were in Afghanistan. They were taking over the control of their land for a few years. What we all know about Taliban is really they are really brutal group of people. They are terrorists, and everyone can like obviously that's obvious, and everyone can see that. And the other thing is Taliban has keep on saying we are changed, but what we can see the action doesn't say that. The action says that Taliban is not changed at all. I was born in Afghanistan, but I never been there. But exactly 22 years ago, after I was born, we moved to Iran. So my family decided to go there to seek for safety. And since then, we came to Australia in 2016. Even though I wasn't in Afghanistan, but I know like what people are going through, especially the women and children. The other point I really want to mention is, and it's important as well, is the Hazara people in Afghanistan. They are getting displacement right now, especially one of the towns is like called Daikundi. So what Taliban announced is they have to leave their homes and countries, home and lands right now. So they have no place to go. So that's another important. And the UNHCR, they have to look for a solution, something so they can solve this problem. The other thing is the girls are not allowed to study any further than year 6. So that means they cannot have any government job in the future. They cannot study like in high school or college or whatever, like something like that, which is really like against our future. We really want like the women and children they get participated like in future like in government jobs. Afghanistan is not only like about the men and like do like only like about like whatever the men is doing. It's like something like it's a group work, and then the women have to participate in all those things as well. Um, Something that I can ask Australian government to do for us is to put Taliban as in the terrorist category, and that could help us a lot because at the moment we can see like Taliban is keep on killing people, keep on like going door to door to looking for the younger girls, looking for those people they used to work in government before in the previous government, and they're looking for them to just kill them. And that's why like they're really looking for safety right now. Uh, the other thing the Australian government can do is, as we all know, they only provided I think like 3,000 visas for Afghan people, but which is not enough. Like considering the population of Australia and like how big this land is, Australia can provide obviously like more visas to those people. The other thing is Australia as well. They can just provide maybe like international students. They can bring the international students here, like from Afghanistan. I never seen any international student from Afghanistan to study here in Australia, and I just don't know what's the reason for that. Uh, Australia should just, I'm pretty sure like one of the things that's really important is like just put the Taliban in the terrorist category, and just the only thing we can do right now is like just raising awareness about like putting everything on social media and seeking for safety and like for those people and especially like our family members, the women and children in Afghanistan. So yeah, that's it from me. Thanks for everyone.
Thank you, Jamshid. And I might now, and again around the same question, because I think that one thing that I think is important for them to take into account is that in forums like this, we basically, most of us are in the same boat. You know, we run the risk of, preaching to the choir. And it's important that we examine the other part of the question. How can we bring the rest of Australia on board? And most importantly, how can we bring the government of the day to adopt policies that consider these important issues? So Lwin, you've been in this area for a long time, and you've been having your own battles, particularly in the context of Burma. Anything that you can ask from that perspective of how can we get this message further? And after that, I'd like to go to Sneha and to Craig. So Lwin.
Thank you, Jose. I think I can see the now 76 United Nations General Assembly. There's two critical issues from the particularly two countries, Afghanistan and Myanmar. So at the Afghanistan, I think the issue is I generally can see the coup military government and take over the power, and the elected government was they are run away, and then the coup military asked for the credential representation. Their representation to the UN General Assembly, but the Credential Committee could not accept until they defer the case until the November or October or something. So the same situation as Myanmar. Myanmar is elected government was overthrown by the military coup, and also military coup leader asked for their representation to the General Assembly. So the same decision by the Credential Committee, they defer the case, but they still accept Myanmar present the permanent ambassador to say Ujo Moton as a representative of the Myanmar, but they have no right to speak up during the session, something like that. So we are really can see the past, the history of the credential issue, and a few countries, some they are military coup, but in the United Nations, they are practice of looking the principle of the member of state and to follow the rule, and also to respect the human rights and regulation and the international law, etc. So that I think no matter you can run the country, you occupy the territory, but you have no right to represent in the United Nations. That's the answer to the both nation. So that our Myanmar people hope that our elected government, overthrow the elected government, can represent on behalf of the people of Myanmar. I hope that Afghanistan is the same issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Lwin. And if we can go to you now, Sneha, and as I said before, I thank you, and you're probably in a more sensitive situation. Now, in my long story of working in this area, I think we had some wonderful allies, within, the public service, both Commonwealth and state, that, whose heart, is in the issues, but of course they need to work within the policy of the government of the day. But from that perspective, are there any hints you can give us as, NGOs, as community organizations, as advocates, in terms of what may be the best way to ensure that the messages that we want to provide in terms of changes policy and more attention to these issues that have been raised can be heard by both government and, I suppose, the bureaucratic system as a whole?
Thanks, Jorge. It's and sorry for being late and my multitude of tech issues today. I think that, it's really interesting, right? I think about this quite a lot because as a public servant, so, my job here in Sydney is to represent all of Home Affairs business, and you'll appreciate as a public servant, obviously working with the government of the day, and I've worked with governments on both sides of politics. I would say being part of the discussion, being active participants in the democratic discussion. I was reflecting on Craig's comments earlier on this morning about the amazing connection with the Afghan Australian community and the community across the world, and the way that has really, I guess, changed the narrative. People in Australia who have no connection to Afghanistan. They don't know anything about our refugee humanitarian programs, but they realise that, you know, we have this connection and we need to do something. And you know, it's about all of those people having a voice. So I think that's one really important thing. I think that the other thing, and so, you know, part of my role is working with communities and with community leaders. I'm really conscious that representation across communities needs to constantly be refreshed. So we have my team here in Sydney, for example, we've got about 750 different communities that we work with. I'm really focused on working with youth, with women, and with different communities, including with organisations like yourself, so that when people have a seat at the table to give government feedback, so beyond, you know, the type of work that Craig does through the AMC, but also with our young people, that is something that we're really focused on. So giving people opportunities to engage fully in the discussion around what is social cohesion, what are some of the challenges, what are some of the barriers. The situation with Afghanistan is incredibly complex from a bureaucratic perspective, because of all of the different legislative requirements around where people are when different visas are lodged. And I won't bore you with all of that, because, you know, I'm really hopeful that very soon those things will be resolved. But, you know, it's communities that give us that feedback, and it's really important that we're able to provide that to government so they can make those decisions. And certainly we work really closely with our Minister Alex Hawke, as the Minister for Immigration, in that kind of capacity. But just generally in terms of the way that Australia responds to humanitarian crises, I think being part of the discussion, many voices are stronger than just one. And the other kind of just final observation I'd make, Jorge, is that Australia has changed dramatically. You know, when my family and I migrated in the early 90s into Melbourne, you know, we were the only, my brother and I, you know, we've been kind of mixed. We were the only ones of us, but now everyone is like that. So how do we kind of change the discussion? And, you know, this is, I guess, not something that's really part of my role, but I'm really passionate about it. We talk about the Australian community. We don't talk about multicultural communities, First Nations communities, to talk about the Australian community. And that is critical, because the more we do that, the more inclusive the narrative is, and the more inclusive we are of saying, oh, well, you're Sneha, you're a representative of Australia, rather than saying, oh, you're Sneha, you're half Indian, you're half, you know, third generation Scottish migrant, whatever that is, and, you know, you are who you are today. So I think the more we do that, Jorge, I think that's really important, and the more people actively participate in that discussion, the more we change the narrative. And I think it's really pleasing that we have discussions like this, but there's lots of different parts of that story, and I think it's time for that change. Yeah.
Thank you, Sneha. And Craig, if I can go to you, I mean, you've already alluded to new voices are, you know, arising in this forum, and voices which can be powerful and maybe more aligned, you know, with you know, the current government. But how can we ensure, you know, that or how can we do the best with both new voices, with the work that can be done with the media? And Sneha talked about a multicultural Australia. We are a lot more multicultural, but that doesn't mean that everybody that has come to Australia from another shore is necessarily proactive in terms of, you know, the refugee issues. So how can we make more of that? So you've been working, you know, very effectively in this field, and you're obviously part of the media. So
that's a big question. That is that's a very good question. That's a number of questions.
Yes.
And so, you know, I'll just try and give a brief perspective, Jorge. It's, you know, so the point you made about all the multicultural communities is absolutely right. And obviously, you know, and I come, as I said before, I come from a very privileged position. You know, I'm in the racial, cultural majority in Australia, and I've never had to worry about these issues personally. And what I've tried to do in the last couple of years is to learn more, be in touch with people who are, you know, having difficulties, whether it's through policy or whatever the case is, and bring that through my platforms to broader Australia in every opportunity that I get. So the first point I'd say is we need to do that more. And what Afghanistan is an opportunity for more Australians, more prominent Australians, to become closer to the issue, which is just a really important issue for all of us. And I congratulate Sneha for being here. And, you know, this is an issue that immigration and refugees has been an issue for Australia for basically over 200 years. So, this goes to the nature of the country. This goes to, us as an island continent who in many times in the past have been repeatedly and quite easily triggered as a country to be made to fear certain groups of people from time to time. That has gone on for a very, very long time. And so I think it's an opportunity, I hope, for Australia to start to have a much broader conversation. I think all of these things are linked. Black Lives Matter was really important because people who are experiencing racism all around the world, including in Australia and our Indigenous communities and communities of colour and different race and even different religions, are feeling much more empowered and they've been given a platform to speak out. And people like me have been rightly told, and I think we're learning much more quickly than ever because of, what Maryam was saying before, social media and so on, is that we have to lift other voices up, and don't center ourselves. And we're learning about racial justice, not just, harmony and inclusiveness. And so, that whole platform and that whole movement around the world, I think, is incredibly important for social change. And you might not see it immediately, but, in the conversations I'm having in sport, and outside, but I often mention sport, Jorge, because it's a very conservative group, sport is, because sport has consistently and traditionally said, oh, gee, we feel uncomfortable with just about anything that has any kind of contentious nature about it. And we just want to go bounce a basketball. And so what the change I see in sport, I think magnifies and amplifies what's happening outside it. And it's quite profound, particularly the new young generation, I think, because of what they've been exposed to, different information and all of these campaigns. I mean, when I was young in Australia, I didn't know about all these campaigns. I wasn't exposed to Black Lives Matter when I was 15, 18, 12. I had absolutely no idea. And therefore, I'm very hopeful about, what the next generation of Australians are going to, how they're going to think differently. And in fact, I am profoundly positive and look forward to what's going to happen in the next 20 years. I think Australia is changing demographically and generationally in many ways for the better. The problem that we have is that, of course, crises like Afghanistan are now, and we all are, emboldened to help people. And, when it comes to, successive governments and different governments and policy, we all, at times are not going to agree. So therefore, so many of us, including me, are going to advocate for change now. And that can be a frustrating process. So just finally, I might say, more high-profile people, ADF legends, veterans, wonderful people have spoken out here. My question would be, how can they now be invited to participate in this broader discussion? Okay, we get that you felt strongly about that because you're personally invested. Wonderful. There's also this whole issue over here, and they're the same people. It's just that you didn't happen to be in their country. Can we draw a straight line between those two? And might we start to now, might you now engage with us in this broader discussion as a country, right? That's one. Second, I think sport and other industries and institutions like that are changing much more quickly and are much more willing to be active in here. And therefore, and thirdly, and just finally, the media remains incredibly important. So those multicultural communities who are active, who are willing to engage publicly in this, and I'm thinking particularly here, for example, in racism, about the Sudanese Melbourne and Sudanese Australian community, did a really good job, I thought, at the time when they were, under stress by the media, improperly and unfairly, in galvanizing support, making sure they made their voice heard, not other people not speaking for them, but we were very much supporting them, lifting up community voices. And, and I've said to them and others, now it's time to galvanize as many multicultural communities as possible and become much more sophisticated and skilled in doing that. Today, you don't need the big media companies, as Maryam said, to amplify your voice. You can be very small community, but you can be very sophisticated, very loud, very prominent, and very effective, very impactful. And when it comes to media, the last thing is you must hold media accountable. We must all hold media accountable. I think it's called All Together Now, I think is the organization who does every year with UTS a review of language used in the media. And there was a really good one done on Muslim Australia and the terminology just used in just every and normalized, you know, and the wrong terms and improper terminology was normalized in Australian life. That stuff, having been in the media for 20 years, is incredibly dangerous. And I think Multicultural Australia and all of us should focus on that much, much, much more and call it out and, you know, advocate to the highest levels of any media companies in the country. Because I've seen when it comes to refugees that the wrong terminology, the wrong discussions can be so incredibly damaging that even the most wonderful Australians can change their mind and think, you know, and allow people to be harmed. So I think that's a really important step forward, and to capitalize, well, not capitalize, that's the wrong word, but you understand what I'm saying, to kind of leverage, you know, the horrible trauma that so many people are going through at the moment in Afghanistan.
Thank you, Craig. I'm getting repeated messages that we need to join, you know, the wider plenary. I know you have your hand up. So Lynn, if you could just limit it to a few seconds, that would be wonderful. Because
thank you, Jose. I think I have difficulty with to deal with the Australian foreign policy, but we have a good partnership with the parliamentary friends from Myanmar. That's Senator Dean Smith and groups are very reliable. And but we have problem with this Senator Mirzaee. So Mirzae's silence the means he inactive since March 7th. And then no matter the situation in Myanmar, it progressively getting worse. But they are very quiet. And then we have a parliamentary public review, and then we raise an issue about Myanmar, and then finally the parliamentary the joint standing committee review the Myanmar case, and then the CiCT could not be accepted because the Australians do not believe the CiCT could change any ground situation. Instead, they prefer bilateral program, or they believe any kind of like for example, like the recently Australia a very active role in the regional comprehensive economic partnership program, including ASEAN and Myanmar and everything. But in point of the justice for every country, that the Australians should be stand on their justice issue and human rights principle. But instead, Australia keeps saying we only accept the nation, no matter who government is ruling. This is a wrong principle, I think. And also, Australia sometimes they don't know about detail of the humanitarian assistance can go. Sometimes our situation is cross-border transferring provision of the humanitarian aid is more effectively. So that Australian people still cannot understand, but we are pushing for. Thank you.
Thank you, Solin. I now would like to invite everyone to join us in the plenary. Thank you so much